Okay, we're going to do one on something that I haven't talked about probably in depth for a couple of years now. Denisovans. Uh, there's been more recent archaeological evidence come out on Denisovans, and then there's been some speculation on what Denisovans had to do with and stuff. And so I wanted to look in a few of these articles. Now, a few of these articles are by Andrew Collins. If you're familiar with his work or not, what he gets into things much like Graham Hancock and so on. Seems to be of that mold of that guy's. I've seen some of his older things where he was making speculations on the Anunnaki off of Sitchin's type of work and stuff like this. And now he's taken to the fact that Denisovans, with just a few artifacts, might be the whole missing link to it all. And it might indeed be of that level and stature. I don't know at this point exactly how much levity or gravity to give them in this situation. Do you give them as much as a Neanderthal, less than a Neanderthal? What do you give them? And we'll look at a few artifacts and things that are swaying people's opinions. Now, oddly enough, you're looking at a picture here, which is a depiction that people have done on the way Denisovans might have lurked. And this is two different versions. On the left is a Sunda area version that they had found, and the genetics run on it. The one on the right is in Siberia. And an instant thought there is that, well, if this is Denisovans, there is an extreme amount of variation that are given to these people. Therefore, these two probably could not be considered Denisovans. They could be considered related in some way, but they would almost get their own nomenclature if they formed that differently. Other hominids are done the same way, so why would something that's this radically different be any different? But there's a radically different depiction that's shown here, and the one on the left, to me, in the first glance of it all, reminded me of a picture in The Hobbit, of the old book. Just straightforward. A little bit buck-toothed, roundish nosed and features, slightly biggish eyes, look kind of like a hobbit. The thing about these is they're not sure of their height and stature or not, but it looked like by their teeth and the one little finger bone that they have of them that they could have been tall people. Or they could have been short people with big hands and big teeth and big mouths and big feet like a hobbit type thing. So they're really unsure, but some conspicuous data would say that they are very tall people, over 6 foot or so, because their molars are so big compared to regular people's molars. And that's really all the information they have on them, is a couple of molars and finger bone and some artifacts associated with them. And we'll look into that. But you see the one on the right hand side, and an instant thought is, well, that looks very much more Amerindian-ish, and that could be, and they're in Siberian area, so this could have been the people that pushed over and went into the Americas. Looks very much more Aztec. You see that nose on uh, the nickel that has the buffalo nickel on it, or the Indian head that's on that, the one that's being taken off of the Washington Redskins helmet, has that aquiline type of nose where it has that hook over into it. And all it really is that the bridge part that's like right here is a little larger and stands up more. So if you connect a regular nose to it, it's got to bend down. But if we look at these two cranial forms, they're radically different than each other too. Brachiocephalic versus very slender looking, and jaw structure would have been totally different. Teeth structure would have been totally different. And I'm one of those people that, after looking and listening to scientists who've looked at various different hominids that they refer to as Homo erectus, and how much variation they have over time, and how it maybe should be split into subgroups, because apparently coming out of that were radically different subgroups later in reality. But you also would see something with this radical amount of difference too, and probably agree with that same type of concept, that, you wouldn't even just say Denisovan this, Denisovan that, but you'd have a different name given to one of them. And if you say the Denisovan cave was the original one, then that's more like the people on the right than the people on the left. But already, this is a mass conjecture on the way that it would look, and he even talks about, in the study, he talks about how they wanted to do something radical different, a little bit tribal, a little bit more primitive, a little bit more so-and-so looking, and Collins is a guy that's now so taken by the Denisovans, he wants to give it credit for Göbekli Tepe, perhaps, and other things, and old world travel and boats and everything. I find it odd that the most advanced people we find during this time don't really seem to get the credit for possibly going anywhere, but they can almost say anybody else does. And I guess in a modern PC world, everybody goes, well, yeah, okay, it was them then. But these people, their DNA is what makes up Islander people. And so there's a radical difference, because people in Irian Jaya or people in Australia are hooked up through this genetics, and people talk about how they may have been the original Australian Aboriginals and not what's there now. That what's now is something that's convergently evolved like it is. Let's just get into this. There's two faces of Denisovan revealed and explained, so he's going to try to explain these two different possibility variations. Andrew Collins exclusively reveals true face of Siberian Denisovan. This was the one on the right. What the Denisovans might have looked like has been one of the hottest debates in paleoanthropology since the discovery of the extinct human lineage back in 2010. Were they big or were they small? Did they look like their cousins, the Neanderthals, or were they more like an anatomically modern humans in appearance? Well, lastly, were they the giants of legend, as some are now speculating, those perhaps red-haired giants, and so on. And you saw the depiction there, the one on the left, definitely looks like it has brownish or chestnut type of hair, but the one on the right, even though not old, apparently has white hair. Or is this just mud caking in it where they're doing rat tails and so on, like you see in the Celts and some other people have having done? All the Rastafarians people, all, dreads, right? So, do they look more like that or Neanderthals, or were they more like anatomically modern humans, it says? But what's odd is that in the last 20 years, probably more like 30, 35, we've figured out that what we originally thought of Neanderthals is not necessarily true. And they weren't so ugh and humped over, pick up rock, and that type of thing. In fact, they have extreme dexterity, all types of things, and now all the artifacts that are associated with them, now they had it going on pretty good. In fact, look a lot like Chuck Norris and stuff, and Shakira and things, all these recreations that people are doing now that are good at recreations and not trying to make a cartoon character, are a belief that we may have had just as recent as 35 years ago. From when I was a kid, everybody was at 6000 BC and didn't have anything going on, and you can't prove me wrong until you find something. Well, slowly we've crept back, finding things well into the last ice age and beyond. So, resolving these issues is difficult, as just a handful of Denisovan fossils remains have been found. They include two enormous molars, the big teeth, two fragments of a parietal bone from a Denisovan skull, and a finger bone from a young female who lived 75,000 years ago, all found during excavations of the famous Denisova cave in Siberia. This is also a 160,000-year-old mandible that was found in a cave in the edge of the Tibetan Plateau in northwest China, and recently identified being that of Denisovan. And I believe what they think now is that it was a Denisovan cross, that it was like part Denisovan, part Neanderthal, and a cross in some way. Now there's arguments on how much cross. Despite this frustrating situation, in September 2019, it was announced that Professor Liren Carmel and David Gochman of Hebrew University in Jerusalem had used epigenetics to analyze gene regulation and cysteine degradation in order to determine the suspected physical makeup of the Denisovan face. They finished their construction and shows the head and neck of a young female with a rounded head, wide mouth and jaw, minimal chin. Well, yeah, Cro-Magnon was the first with really a prominent chin. Brown skin, they say, and striking brown eyes. So well received was their reconstruction that in December 2019, the team won the 2019 Science Magazine's People's Choice for Breakthrough of the Year. And I believe people have talked about that one too, though, and given some criticism. Of course, if it's real heralded, then you don't get to criticize it too much. But they criticized it in a way that they used the extra genetics that they weren't, or their origin marker, as of being like Tibetan people and stuff. And it's like, okay, well then, no matter what you have, if you take out that part, you have a brown-eyed person with darker skin. So you're getting that. But they've also found the same genetics in Norwegians and people that live there. Yeah, and they don't have anything like that going on. So when they first described them as being as perhaps olive skin, like a Mediterranean type, next thing you know, you see that listed as being brown skin. Then you see as dark skin, and all this stuff goes on. And next thing you know, they paint Cheddarman with mahogany shoe polish, and that's not reality. We've already been there. But they want to show as much a diversity and variety as possible. So here's that picture. And somebody said also that the genetics has a chance for greenish eyes and things too. It wouldn't necessarily be a blue-eyed trait, but their marker that's on them shows a general brownish or lighter hair, but not blonde as the regular norm, and brown eyes. And so you can see this here, and how radically that looks different than the other picture. And the people that would have been associated with this Denisovan versus the people that would have been associated with the other version. Well, let's look into how he breaks it down. That's the Hebrew University version. Genetic reconstructions. Well, crucial in Carmel and Gockman's reconstruction of the Denisovan face was the data gained from the lineage genome, first sequenced in 2010 by the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. Famous site. Get a lot of good data from there. This showed that a significant number of Denisovan genes have been inherited by modern human groups through interbreeding in the distant past. It is perhaps for this reason that Carmel and Gockman's Denisovan bears similarities to Papua New Guineans and also certain Australian originals or aboriginals, both of whom display anything up from 5% DNA Denisovan ancestry. Well, that's not very much, and it wouldn't give you too much, but they say that that locked phenotype might be the reason that you see a certain phenotype that is real common in between them. Not to say that they all look the same, but they have an all general look that's pretty recognizable. Now the figure below that we're looking at, which shows Koori originals photographed around 1847 in Victoria, Australia, their features are particularly the man in the middle can easily compared with Carmel and Gockman's Denisovan reconstruction. So the man in the middle. Oh, okay, so it would have been something like this. And, well, you can see the comparison of the nose pretty much and everything off of it, but you can also see this guy looks like he's got a little admix of something too, as comparative to that, but a very good comparison. But he also doesn't have an aquiline nose that hooks, although the nose is higher set to where you can't really put your finger at the top of the nose in between that and your brow line. Normally your finger will go in between and set there, but these people get to the point where it's a smaller point. They almost cross over each other, i.e. like this, and what you saw in that other photograph. Notice their body scarring. They don't do tattoos and stuff. Wait and see if they figure out that the Denisovans did tattoos, and then that's where all that comes from. So I wonder how much could have been inherited by the Denisovans We know now that maybe some ways of doing things we inherited from interactions with Neanderthals and so on. And you say, well, they had some good interactions too. Maybe we learned that too. Maybe it's all a culmination. I mean, well, Caucasians don't care. I mean, it's like, well, what made it all up? How'd it go? So do the Denisovans look like Australian Aboriginals or indigenous Malaysians? Because there's a difference there. The answer is almost certainly no. For example, studies of Denisovan genes inherited by modern populations in East Asia and islands Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, have revealed their information about the evolution of the Denisovan genome. This shows that soon after the Denisovans split from a common ancestor they shared with their cousins, the Neanderthals, up in Eurasia, as much as 475,000 years ago, the population diverged into two separate types. So it would have become Neanderthals and then this type here. But you look at the variation, they say that's within this type, just on speculation, and I think we're looking at 3. So it could go deeper. They just need to find some more specimens. And it's going to take a few before you would really be able to go, okay, this is kind of what they all look like. You know, you can say Caucasians look like this. No, they don't. No, they don't. They don't all look like Karen. Or they don't look like Barbie. Or they don't look like Ken. Or they don't look like this. Or they don't look like that. But you could get a few of them together and you go, that's kind of what they look like. And even though still there are hundreds of examples where they don't look like any of those, you could go, well, yeah, that's kind of, and start to get in a ballpark. But right now, we just had a ballpark that was all the way from somebody who looks like, I don't know, somebody you'd find lost in the rainforest of South America, crossed with something weird. Then the other comparison is somebody that looks like a hobbit from the Lord of the Rings. That's just totally, radically different in my mind. It's hard to process that they would attempt to put them together as one, but the second recreation isn't some heralded Hebrew university blah blah blah. It's a speculation on other people by saying, well, they've got Tibetan plateau and da da da, they have those genetics, a small amount, therefore maybe they looked like them. And it's like, well, no, not really. Maybe they looked a lot more like the Hobbit and they still got that. See how that works? You know, mountain people, dwarves and stuff in the D&D world would have been well acclimated to mountain living and have that gene for it. So one Denisovan population, he says, came to inhabit a vast territory possibly extending from Central Asia, Siberia, and northern China into the north and to Mongol and Tibet to the south, maybe even into the Americas way back when. As we've seen, there's some suspicious data that shows that. Their descendants most likely moved through the Russian Far East before finally crossing the Beringia land bridge into North America, this occurring perhaps as early as 20,000 years ago. Or more, which, if they say 20,000, then there wasn't a land bridge there, unless they've got boat travel and other things. So this is where the juxtaposition comes in Clovis and all that stuff. From the many discoveries being made in the Denisovans' lair at the Denisovan cave, it would seem that these Siberian Denisovans, as they are known, displayed a high level of advanced human behavior. This included the creation of beautiful jewelry, and we'll look at a picture of that in a minute, the Denisovan bracelet below, the making of earliest known musical instruments in the form of whistles or a flute, the earliest manufacture of bone needles used most probably to create warm winter clothing, and so on, and the production of earliest symbolic art. It takes the form of an exquisite carving of a mountain lion, they say. It's kind of all worn down and looking at, but they say, well, it was probably a child's comfort toy, which has incised markings suggesting of a basic knowledge of cyclic time too, by the way. And I don't know if you go that far with it, but in a few videos we'll discuss what he talks about and who knew what when. This is that famous bracelet, and it's made of like a chloratite or whatever. It's kind of like jade. And whenever you look at it, you can see translucently through it a little bit. What's clearly known is that it's well made. It was round at one time, and it had a hole drilled through it right over here. That's a perfect hole drilled into it. Slightly tapered in its drilling, but it's been drilled out. And the belief is that there would have been another hole over here, a little farther away, and then that string that would have been wrapped around there constricts the size of it, allowing it to stay up onto your arm, but also might have hung feathers or something like that from it also. And if I was to tell you this was made in 800 BC, you'd be like, wow, they did something out of stone that good and everything back then. Wow, and it didn't crack. Well, it eventually did, ha ha. If I was to tell you 1800 BC, you'd have to start going, wow. If I was to tell you, well, this is like 74,000 BC, you'd be like, no. Well, yeah. In fact, if they ditch it and they say the layer above, like somehow it was there, or those people dug and buried it right below the next level, it's like 44,000. So even if you take the idea that, well, long after those people died and there was a good layer there, these people dug a pit and hid their special jewelry in it, and then now we got 8 foot more silt over that packed, where would that be? That's like 44,000 BC. And so they've come to the idea that, well, thought to be at least 50,000 years old, that they're giving it that much levity to it. Instead of trying to put it with the 75 find, they go, well, it could have been in the layer above that, and they're 44, and they're 50,000. But it's not like 8 or 3. It's also thought possible that Siberian Denisovans developed a sophisticated blade 2 technology that was afterwards adopted by the first modern humans to settle in Mongolia some 30 to 40,000 years ago. So they could be connected with ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans and so on. The Sunda Denisovans, though, it's over here more. The other population of Denisovans lived in southern and southeastern Eurasia, as well as the islands southeast of Asia, Melanesia, and possibly even Australia. So the Hobbit form is the ones that's seen all through there, and the other one is just seen up in Siberia, and it looks a little more Indian. But hold on, where does that go to? They displayed a more basic genome, suggesting that they were a more archaic lineage than their northern neighbors. So, again, also, you could see maybe the genetics changing over time and these people radically changing because of other interactions and ending up looking totally different. The same thing could be said about the Sunda variant. And he could run into Neanderthals, which seem to have more whitish nose and so on, instead of a hook nose, and bam. But what if the Neanderthal got with that one and boom, and it would exaggerate the hook nose thing? There could be different things like that happen out of it. So speculation is really rampant. And until, again, once we get some more bones and stuff, we'll probably be able to make a more accurate assessment. The second branch of Denisovans are known, though, as the Sunda Denisovans, occasionally Australo-Denisovans, after the former Sunda Island landmass that was once linked to the Malaysian peninsula with Indonesia. Now, this is what we call Mu, or whatever, if you will, or Lemuria. They themselves would appear to have split into 2 distinct groups themselves, and the youngest of them, according to genetic evidence, perhaps lingering on in places like the Philippines and Papua New Guinea until around 15,000 years ago. So maybe when everything went bad, it could have gone, but that's also speculation, for they haven't found anybody that's a Denisovan straight up, except for these little pieces here. So what are they saying? Well, genetics maybe, and I don't know where they get the possibility they could be that long. We'll probably find it in another video. So far, there is no hard evidence that the Sunda Denisovans developed the same advanced human behavior achieved by their northerly neighbors. Stone tools as much as 50,000-year-old found on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi may have been made by Denisovans. He just contrasted his statement. If they were created by Denisovans, then it would imply that their ancestor had not only crossed the Wallace line, which we talked about in a couple of videos not long ago, but the deep water channel dividing most of the Indonesian archipelago from Sulawesi. So you would have had to have boats, they know, and everything off of boom. Well, they find people there and on Australia 50,000 years ago. So, oh, they weren't maybe so developed. Look, these people developed a bracelet that's pretty kick-ass. That's amazing. These people are boating. That's pretty kick-ass. You know what? It would be real cool if you could end up with boating people that had bracelets. All you got to do is have them meet each other and a little bit of figuring out, watching them do it, watch them build a boat. They get the idea. Maybe their boats weren't as good too. Maybe they're just little bitty, or maybe they had some big boats, but they knew how to make little ones too. And that's kind of the starting of the canoes and the things. A lot of variations on a thought here. Let me know what you think down in the comments so far. So far, there's no hard evidence, though. So, if they passed that Wallace line, they also had to have seagoing capabilities. This said, the Sunda Denisovans are likely to have had developed a sophisticated blade tool technology like their northerly counterparts, since only so-called flake tools existed in the islands Southeast Asia during the prehistoric age. This is islands above Bali and through that area there. If the portrait of the young female created by Carmel and Gauckman's Hebrew University team is truly representative of a Denisovan, then it is the likeness of a Sunda Denisovan and not a Siberian variation, whose evolutionary development was quite different due to that of its southerly counterparts. So, now oddly, they're saying the southerly counterpart looks more white, and then the northerly counterpart looks more Indian, if you will. But there's more to that, and people that have a hooked nose and a connection, and let's see if we can get there with it. So, the question remains, what did the Siberian Denisovans look like? How different would they have been to Carmel and Gauckman's reconstruction, the Hobbit one? To answer this question, we present writer asked independent researcher and writer Debbie Cartwright to help with the collation of everything available on the physical appearance of Siberian Denisovans. This included all obvious information obtained from the Denisovan genome, such as the fact that Denisovans had brown hair, brown eyes, and brown skin, they say, along with any further information to be gleaned from a few fossil remains found to the date. We also looked into the suspected effects on the lineage evolutionary development derived from knowledge that the Siberian Denisovans would appear to have thrived at a very high altitude and also in extremely cold conditions, like the Eskimos. Knock, knock. This probably included the Altai Mountains of Siberia and Mongolia and the Tibetan Plateau, and if they went through the last ice age and before then, 100,000 years, got to see two of them. One of the highest places on Earth is the Tibetan Plateau, and they're seen to be in their genetics also, but it's just a small amount, but they got just the right gene. Well, maybe others got their same stuff, but they were the ones that were able to sit up on mountains and breathe all day like it's nothing and carry your backpack without starting to wheeze in 5 minutes. Such extreme environments might well have necessitated the development of specialized respiratory systems, including highly adapted noses that were able to both absorb all available oxygen at altitudes where the air was particularly thin, while at the same time warming up air sufficiently before it passed into the lungs. For instance, a study by Mark Shriver, a geneticist and anthropologist at Pennsylvania State University, found that the effects of climate upon the evolution of nose size and shape suggested that larger, narrower noses are more suited to higher and colder climates, while the wider, flatter noses are more suited to hot or tropical climates to help vent heat. The Neanderthal connection. It is important also not to forget that Denisovans were related genetically to Neanderthals, meaning that they would have borne at least some physical characteristics in common with them, and not be radically different. This probably included a heavy brow ridge, thick-set features, and a receding chin, a fact confirmed by the discovery of a 160,000-year-old Denisovan mandible found in the cave on the Tibetan Plateau in northern western China. This is extremely wide and robust and lacks a well-defined chin. Yeah, but it's got big old molar teeth in it. It was found in 1980. Also, like the Neanderthals, the Denisovans probably had receding foreheads and extended occipital buns, meaning they perhaps had elongated heads, as opposed to the more rounded craniums displayed by some early modern human populations, such as Australian Aboriginals. And he may be trying to also make the connection with the longer head people and who they might be. But I think the genetics on that showed it was people who had lived, and still some of them live, around the Black Sea today. Genetics that they knew from them. Ancient genetics says these people lived there then. Modern human integration. Having made the connection between Denisovans and Neanderthal physiology, it is also likely that Denisovans had at least some traits in common with anatomical modern humans, Homo sapiens. When a previously misplaced fragment of the finger bone found in the Denisovan cave in 2008 was reunited with the second finger bone, more famous, fragment used by the Max Planck Institute to sequence the Denisovan genome, it was realized that the finger bone did not resemble that of Neanderthal as had been widely expected. Although the finger bones of archaic humans such as Neanderthals and Homo erectus are extremely thick and quite stubby, the Denisovan finger bone is a lot slimmer, like that of an anatomically modern human. This connection between anatomically modern humans and Denisovans is perhaps far deeper than anyone has so far suspected, for as the current writer has speculated elsewhere, there is a strong likelihood that the ancestors of the Siberian Denisovans, after leaving Africa, encountered pre-dispersal modern humans already occupying the Levant. Well, if they did, then where did they come from? Think about that statement. So there were already people who had formed out of the ancientest of things in separation of each other, and Denisovans came up out of Africa and ran into them? Is that what we're going with? Evidence for the existence of these early modern humans has come from the discovery at the Qasim Cave in Israel of 8 teeth belonging to members of the Aquilo-Yarubian Cultural Complex, AYCC, which thrived in the Levant corridor circa 420,000 to 250,000 years ago. These were found to be almost identical to those of anatomically modern humans, and so this was really close getting to it. Now we've realized that there is Homo sapiens at 325 or 315,000 years, found at Jebel Arud Cave, but the oldest right now accepted modern human, as modern as they are today, are Caucasians that were living in Ethiopia at 165,000 years ago. And genetics wise, which we can't go back farther than this, lucky to get it, Cro-Magnon man, who we always thought was some Cro-Magnon man. No, his genes are still existent today. That guy could be walking around pretty much. Nothing's really changed that much. He still exists, and so now they're just called early European hunter-gatherers. Isn't that convenient? Having interbred with these early modern humans, the Siberian Denisovans would have then have continued their migration eastward, centering in Central Asia, Siberia, and finally Mongolia, China. If correct, they would have been carrying physiological traits that picked up from early modern humans living in the Levant. This is something that the Sunda Denisovans would seem to have missed out on, since they most likely took a different route out of Africa, crossing the Arabian Peninsula before entering southern Asia, southeastern Asia, and finally the islands of Southeast Asia. So they're saying skirting across down at the bottom here, but then that involves waterborne travel. Oh, we've already accepted that. It's the other people did, right? They made all the difference, the way they came out. Perhaps it's different than this entirely. Yeah, eventually you're going to have to get away from everybody came out. and there were separate populations that formed from things that came either in or out long, long before that and turned into different things. Like there's different kinds of monkeys everywhere, but they're real close, same thing. The possibility of the Siberian Denisovans were carried at least some early modern human genes might also explain why Siberian Denisovan genome is slightly different to that of Sunda, and why they would appear to have displayed advanced human behavior before their final dispersion around 45,000 years ago, which just brings into the time of Cro-Magnon. And so this brings us to an impression of the Siberian Denisovan that appears as follows. The more I look at that, guys, the more it looks like the Wicked Witch of the West if they were just to paint it green. In fact, my wife has contacts that are colored, made for studios and stuff, that are yellow with a red ring around it. And I don't know where they get the idea that they've got golden eyes with red rings around it, and big old hook nose, and little bitty mouth, and prop their hair all up like that. And I don't know if anyone ever existed like that, but I would say it must be slightly exaggerated in some form or another. What are your thoughts initially on that? So, they took the genetic information of Denisovan and Neanderthal fossils and unique traits in anatomically modern humans to reconstruct it. So they just took some weird ideas. For our reconstruction of the Siberian Denisovan, we have included some physical traits seen in modern human populations all over the place, and so they tried to throw that together. And they also tell you here that they include modern populations in North Asia, East Asia, even North America, where the first peoples of the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River region, such as the Ojibwa and Cree, have been found to possess some Denisovan DNA ancestry. They, more than any other population, might have retrained Siberian Denisovan traits through this isolation of their ancestries through the historical period. Debbie Cartwright and I then worked with a talented Californian artist, George Hernandez, to achieve the best likeness of an archaic Siberian Denisovan, and is shown for comparison alongside the Carmel and Gockman's own reconstruction. And again, here we look at a radical difference in something that ends up in a radically different position later. And I think we can understand that easy, but let's just go on. Many similarities can be noted between the two versions, including wide mouths, not really, receding chins, yeah, heavy brow ridges, kinda, yep, kinda, brown eyes, skin, and hair, also large noses, but there are also some differences. The face of Siberian Denisovan is much longer, the brow ridge more prominent, like that of Neanderthal. The forehead recedes more, while the cheekbone is much higher. So they're giving it this different type effect. Now, what time I got here? 38. Let's see if we can get through this. Aquiline noses. Now, he's justifying this, but check this out. We've also chosen to give Denisovan a narrow aquiline nose with a prominent bridge, as opposed to the large but smaller flattened nose of the Carmel Gockerman reconstruction of the Hobbit. We also have seen such distinctive noses help the absorption of oxygen in elevated environments where the air is particularly thin. Yet curiously, an aquiline nose, also known as a Roman or a hook nose, quite often seen in ewes, combined with a prominent bridge, has often been compared with the head shape of a large bird, most obviously that of an eagle. Knock knock. The Latin word for aquiline means eagle-like. Bird shamanism would appear to have played a significant role in human development as much as 400,000 years. If we were to suspect the Siberian Denisovans did possess aquiline noses, then would their prominent bridges and heavy brow ridges, there's every reason to suspect that their facial details could be said to resemble those of a bird, something noted in individuals with aquiline noses even in modern times. And people say, oh, look, you say hit you right on the beak. You hear about that, beak is received of it. And so you look at this, and it's a little strange. Maybe the eyes are a little bit large, and you can tell this is slightly exaggerated, little forms of them. But whenever you compare that to birds and their forms, you can see that effect, and why people may have adopted birds or been more into adopting birds in ancient times. For I've shown you a lot of connections where the ancient thing about buzzards and vultures and how it goes with how people would take them into the afterlife and so on. And so this appearance would probably carry on. You want to see somebody that really has that effect nowadays that looks just about like what we just looked at. If you ever looked at Greg Norman, the golfer, he has definitely an eagle eye stare, and he's got that nose, and he looks like he's just on the edge of caw. He's good, yeah. So, if correct, this might have encouraged Siberian Denisovan groups to adopt the guise of birds to engage in early forms of animism and even shamanism, similar to that noted with connection with the AYCC inhabitants of the Kasem Cave in Israel as much as 400,000 to 250,000 years ago. In other words, Siberian Denisovans came to resemble birds, both in physical appearance and in their mannerisms, a connection emphasized, even celebrated through ritual practices. And we talked about how there's ancient Proto-Indo-European burials where there's bird shamans and whole cloaks that were bird skulls and stuff, and this whole effigy with feathers and things that goes along with it, that some other people had a connection to too, and headdresses and so on. And although it's a variation on a theme, there's your American Indians too. Now they talk about dreadlocks and they give socio reasons for it, and they tell you that different people do it. Deliberate management of long hair by dreading it or putting it in braids, but they can put it in mud or take goat hair and wrap it in that, as the Himba women do. Coat it aids in the prevention of lice and other insect infestations. In addition to this, dreadlocks bunched up on the head would have accentuated the Denisovans' suspected elongated heads, and emphasizing their individuality and identity in a world towards the end of their time, circa 50,000 years ago, would have included Neanderthals, anatomically modern humans, and most likely hybrids stemming from an admixture of all these various lineages of the Homo genus, bringing about the different peopling of the world today, or at least the known world of those people that are attached to them. And so here's a presentation where he goes into Meet the Denisovans. I should watch it, but with a grain of salt. I've almost had too much salt lately. I'm trying to cut down. Personal bias. He tells you that he has a possible personal bias in that, and that it will always involve some personal bias. This can be seen, for example, from the many different representations of Neanderthals, but it's changed throughout the ages. And where that bias comes in is people's knowledge of it. And well, they weren't Uggs, so then they don't look it so much. And all of a sudden somebody looks like Chuck Norris. They range from virtually ape men covered with thick body hair to others where the individual becomes almost indistinguishable from any red-haired, freckled person you might encounter on the street today, Chuck Norris. Thus, it has to be accepted that the Denisovan face, managed by artist George Hernandez under the directions of Cartwright, and the author must, by definition, have its own personal bias. This said, we feel that the closest representation to date of Siberian Denisovan is opposed to the face of the Sunda Denisovan developed by Carmel and Guckelman. So they're standing beside this and saying, well, yeah, but there can be that much variation and still call it the same thing. And you could say, well, they started out like this and ended like this in just this one area. No, convergence, and it happens. And it's like, well, then we'd have to end up at a different place by the end of that, I guess. I don't know. It depends on how long you want to give a lineage and its breakdown. But then you would have to show how it changed over time. So, and the small changes in other animals are given new names. So, this was first implied by the enormous size of the two Denisovan molars found in the Denisovan cave, as whether it was real tall or not. And it was suggested of a huge body frame, but not enough fossil remains have come to light to answer the questions of height, girth, and with any degree of certainty. So until such times, we must be content with the two faces of Denisovan presented to the public so far, that Carmel and Gaukelman's team of the Hebrew University and